She was the people's princess. But for Diana's sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, she was simply Mum. Now, nearly 20 years since her passing, the two grown princes are sharing their most intimate memories of their mother for the first time.
The emotional moment reportedly began with something Princess Charlotte said about a grandmother she never had the chance to meet. What followed revealed how deeply Princess Diana's memory still lives inside William's family.
The memory of Granny Diana is being kept alive for Prince George and Princess Charlotte by their father, the Duke of Cambridge, who regularly talks to them about his mother.
Charlotte was only a little child when her innocent words about Granny Diana exposed something deeply personal about her father, Prince William.
I think constantly talking about Granny Diana. So we've got more photos up around the house now of her, and we talk about her a bit and stuff.
Suddenly, a childhood message carried a much heavier meaning. But what exactly did Charlotte reveal about Diana, and why did her words leave people looking at the royal family differently? Let's uncover the story. The grandmother Charlotte never met. Princess Charlotte came into the world long after Princess Diana's life had tragically ended. She never had the chance to sit beside her grandmother, hear her laugh, receive a birthday hug, or create the simple childhood memories that usually make a grandparent feel close. For Charlotte, Diana could never be someone she remembered personally. But strangely, that did not mean Diana was absent from her childhood. In fact, Diana's memory was already woven into the family Charlotte was born into. Her name carried a history that was impossible to ignore. She was not simply a former princess whose photographs appeared in newspapers. She was not merely the woman millions around the world still remembered with affection. She was Charlotte's grandmother, and that changed everything. William knew Diana in a way Charlotte never could. He had lived with her, talked to her, laughed with her, and experienced her as his mother. He remembered the little things that no photograph could ever capture. He also remembered the painful moment when that relationship was suddenly taken away from him. Charlotte inherited none of those personal memories. Instead, she inherited the stories. She had photographs of Diana to look at. She had a family that could tell her about the woman behind those famous images. And most importantly, she had William, the son who had known Diana better than almost anyone else in the family. As Charlotte grew older, she began to understand that her grandmother had been far more than a famous royal. Diana had changed the way millions of people viewed the monarchy. She had become one of the most recognizable women in the world, while her charitable work and connection with ordinary people continued to shape the way she was remembered. But Charlotte was not learning about all of this as a stranger. She was learning about it as Diana's granddaughter, and that made the connection surprisingly intimate. Every story William told about his mother gave Charlotte another piece of a woman she could never personally remember. Every photograph helped put a face to the grandmother she had missed, without ever knowing what it meant to miss her. Then, as Charlotte became old enough to understand her father's feelings, something even more revealing happened. Though Princess Charlotte never got to meet Princess Diana personally, she has been told enough by her father to understand who she was. But what did she say about the woman her father described to her? And how much weight can those words carry as they come from a little child? Let's uncover the emotional details. Charlotte's 5-word message about Diana. The moment that gave this story a completely different emotional weight came in 2026. Princess Charlotte was only 11 years old when she wrote a Mother's Day message for someone she could never actually remember meeting. Instead of writing to her own mother, Charlotte addressed the message to her late grandmother, Princess Diana. She called her Granny Diana. At first, there was something beautifully innocent about it. It sounded like a little girl reaching out to someone she had been taught to remember and love. Charlotte expressed that she was thinking about Diana and that she loved her. But then came the words that made the message stand out. Charlotte wrote that "Papa is missing you." It was a short sentence, but it carried far more emotion than its simplicity suggested. Charlotte was not telling Diana that she personally remembered her. She couldn't. She had been born years after Diana's death. Instead, she was recognizing something she had learned about her father. William missed his mother. That detail made the message surprisingly powerful because it showed that Charlotte had begun to understand something about grief that most children her age would struggle to put into words. Somewhere within her young life, she had learned that Diana's absence still mattered. She understood that her father had lost someone important. And perhaps most importantly, she understood that the person William had lost was not simply Princess Diana, the famous royal everyone else remembered. She was his mother. That is what transformed Charlotte's little message into something much more meaningful. It became a rare glimpse into the private side of William's family, a side the public rarely gets to see. For years, William had largely avoided turning his grief into a public performance. He carried the memory of Diana quietly, while building his own life, and eventually raising children of his own. But Charlotte's innocent words suggested that the subject of Diana was still very much alive inside their home. The little girl had never met her grandmother, yet she knew enough to understand that her father still missed her. And suddenly, the story was no longer simply about a child remembering a woman from royal history. It was about a daughter recognizing her father's loss and, in her own innocent way, reaching across generations to remember the grandmother she never had the chance to know. But it also raised an even more interesting question. If Charlotte understood that her father still missed Diana, how much had she actually learned about the grandmother she never had the chance to know? Charlotte made it clear that her father still misses Diana deeply. But how did William keep Diana's memory alive in his family decades after her death? And how did Charlotte come to feel about the name Diana when she heard it? Let's find out. Keeping Diana's memory alive. When William became a father, he faced a deeply personal challenge most parents never experience. How could he introduce his children to a grandmother they would never meet, while still helping them understand how much she meant to their family? Diana could not walk into the nursery one morning and greet George, Charlotte, or Louis. She could not hold them during their first birthdays, take them on an ordinary family outing, or sit beside William and watch them grow. She could not create new memories with the grandchildren she never got to know. So William had to find another way. He gave them stories. According to accounts about the family, William has spoken about his mother with his children and kept photographs of Diana within their family environment. Through those small but meaningful efforts, Diana became part of their everyday understanding of where their family came from. She was absent in person, but she was not absent from their family story. And that helps explain why Charlotte could eventually speak about Diana in such a natural and emotional way. She was not simply learning about a famous princess from television or hearing her name mentioned during important royal occasions. She was growing up knowing that this woman had a personal place in her family, her grandmother. That difference is important. William could remember Diana through personal experiences. He knew her voice, her personality, her affection, her humor, and the moments they shared. Charlotte could never have those memories herself. Instead, she inherited pieces of them, a photograph here, a story there, a memory shared by her father, perhaps a family conversation that helped turn an absent figure into someone who still felt strangely familiar. William was not simply teaching his children about Princess Diana, the famous woman the world remembered. He was helping them see her differently, as their grandmother, their family, and someone whose presence still mattered deeply. In doing so, something remarkable happened. Diana's story no longer belonged only to those who knew her personally. Through William and his children, her memory quietly crossed generations, reaching people who never met her yet, still grew up knowing why she mattered. And for Charlotte, that inherited connection would eventually become much more meaningful than anyone might have expected. Beyond Charlotte's emotional words about Diana, could there still be a deep connection between Diana and William even after all these years? And how much does William still miss his mother, despite building a loving family of his own? Let's uncover the painful details. William's hidden grief. The most powerful part of Charlotte's message may not have been the words themselves. It may have been what those simple words quietly revealed about her father, showing that beneath William's public strength, Diana's absence still carries an emotional weight. For decades, one image has remained connected to William's loss of Diana. a 15-year-old boy walking behind his mother's coffin through the streets of London while millions of people watched. The world saw a young prince trying desperately to stay composed. He was surrounded by cameras, crowds, and unimaginable grief, yet he had to keep walking. That was the William the public remembered. But Charlotte grew up knowing a very different William. She knew him as her father. She saw the man who had grown from that grieving teenager into an adult, a husband, and eventually a father himself. And somewhere along the way, she also learned that the loss of Diana had never completely disappeared from his life. That is what makes her message so revealing. Charlotte did not need to explain William's grief in detail. Her simple words suggested that she had already noticed it. She knew that her father missed his mother, and that creates an extraordinary emotional connection between 3 generations. Diana was the mother who was suddenly taken away. William was the son who had to grow up without her. Charlotte became the granddaughter who never met Diana, yet somehow learned enough about her to understand that her absence still hurt her father. That is where this story becomes much more human. Diana's memory did not survive simply because newspapers continued publishing photographs of her or because documentaries kept telling her story. It survived inside a family. It survived because William carried his memories of his mother into his own home and eventually shared them with his children. Charlotte's message suggested that those memories had reached her. But there was another way Diana's influence could appear in Charlotte's life. It had nothing to do with a card, nothing to do with photographs, nothing to do with something William had said. It could be found in something much more ordinary: a childhood interest, a passion, a familiar connection. Aside from Charlotte's message showing that William still carries the emotional weight of losing his mother as a child, could there also be something that connects Charlotte to Diana? If so, could she have unintentionally developed a bond with the grandmother she never had the chance to meet? Let's dive into the details. The link that goes beyond words. One of the most fascinating connections between Princess Charlotte and Diana has nothing to do with a speech, a photograph, or a family story. It comes through something much simpler: ballet. Diana had a long-standing connection with ballet. She developed an interest in the discipline when she was young, and that passion later became one of the more memorable parts of her public life. Her famous performance with dancer Wayne Sleep became an unforgettable moment, showing a playful and confident side of Diana that the public did not always get to see. Then, years later, Charlotte developed an interest in ballet too. On its own, that may not seem particularly remarkable. After all, countless children become fascinated by dancing, and there is no evidence that Charlotte chose ballet because she was consciously following in Diana's footsteps. But knowing who her grandmother was makes the connection difficult to ignore. Charlotte never had the chance to watch Diana dance in person. She never received lessons from her grandmother. She never heard Diana encourage her from the side of a stage or watched her prepare for a performance. Yet somehow, another small connection appeared between 2 generations of the same family, and perhaps that is what makes it so touching. Diana's influence does not have to appear through dramatic declarations or emotional public moments. Sometimes, it can be found in the smallest details of family life. Sometimes, a family legacy survives in the smallest ways, through a name lovingly passed down, a familiar photograph kept close, stories shared by a father, or even a simple interest that unexpectedly echoes something from the past. Charlotte may eventually choose a completely different path. She may develop interests that have nothing to do with Diana. She may grow into a personality entirely her own. But comparisons will almost certainly follow her, because of the woman whose bloodline she carries. And that is where this story becomes even more meaningful. Charlotte is not simply learning about a grandmother she never met. She is growing up surrounded by Diana's memories, stories, and influence, while slowly creating her own identity and perhaps carrying a small part of her grandmother's legacy into the future. In that sense, Diana's legacy may not be something Charlotte was simply taught. It may be something she is quietly carrying into the future. It has been observed that some of Diana's traits may have unintentionally appeared in Charlotte, even though they never met. But what intentional link was created between them? And could Charlotte become a way for Diana's memory to remain visible in the present day? Let's find out. Carrying Diana's legacy. Another detail makes Princess Charlotte's connection to Diana even more touching, and it is something she has carried since birth. Her name, Charlotte Elizabeth Diana, quietly connects her to her grandmother and keeps Diana's memory alive in a new generation. When William and Catherine chose Diana's name for their daughter, they were doing more than paying tribute to a much-loved member of the family. They were carrying Diana's memory into another generation. When Charlotte was born, she was far too young to understand what that name meant. She could not have known why Diana was so important to her father, why millions of people still remembered her, or why her grandmother remained such a powerful figure decades after her death. But as Charlotte grew older, those pieces of the story would gradually become clearer. She would learn about Diana's life, her marriage to Charles, her charitable work, her relationship with William and Harry, and the enormous public attention that followed her everywhere. More importantly, she would begin to understand Diana not simply as a famous princess, but as the mother her own father lost when he was still a teenager. And that makes Charlotte's connection to Diana remarkably personal. She carries Diana's name. She has grown up seeing photographs of her. She has heard stories about her from William. She knows that her father still misses his mother. And, perhaps most emotionally, she once wrote a message directly to the grandmother she never had the chance to meet. That is a very different kind of relationship from the one millions of people have with Diana. For millions, Diana is a beloved figure from the past, remembered through photographs and stories. But for Charlotte, her grandmother is more than history. She is family, a name, a memory, and part of who she is. She is the grandmother whose photographs can be seen, whose story can be told, whose name lives inside her own, and whose absence is still felt by the people closest to her. And perhaps that is why Charlotte's words carry more weight than they first appear to. Because when she speaks about Diana, she is not simply remembering the past, she is showing how that past has quietly become part of the future. Beyond naming Charlotte after Diana to keep her memory alive in William's family, how deeply did Charlotte come to feel connected to Diana? And could Diana's story become even more meaningful through the generation of children she left behind? Let's uncover the details. More than a royal memory, Diana has been gone for decades, yet her presence still quietly lives on within the next generation, through family stories, cherished memories, her name, and the children who never knew her personally. So much has changed since 1997. Charles eventually became king. William grew into the heir to the throne. A new generation of royals was born, including George, Charlotte, and Louis. Even the atmosphere surrounding the monarchy is very different from the one Diana knew. Charlotte, in particular, has grown up in a royal world her grandmother never had the chance to see. She never watched Diana walk into a room. She never heard her laugh in person. She never received a birthday hug from her. She never had the chance to sit beside her and hear stories directly from her. And yet Diana has never been completely absent from Charlotte's life. Her photographs remain. Her charitable work is still remembered. Her story continues to be discussed. William has carried his memories of his mother into his own family, and Diana's name has become part of Charlotte herself. That last detail may be more important than it first appears, because royal families survive by changing with the times. One generation takes over from another. Titles change, responsibilities change, public expectations change. Even the people standing at the center of the institution eventually change. But memories are different. You cannot simply replace them with a new title or remove them when the next generation arrives. And Charlotte's words offered a small but powerful glimpse of that reality. Diana is no longer only part of William's childhood. She has become part of Charlotte's understanding of who her family is. That means her memory has crossed a generational line. William knew Diana as his mother. Charlotte knows her as her grandmother. And although those relationships are completely different, they are connected by the same woman. Perhaps that is what makes Charlotte's connection to Diana so interesting. Diana's story did not end when her life was tragically cut short. It continued through William and Harry, reached their children, and quietly lived on through family memories, stories, and the love passed from one generation to another. And now, Charlotte is carrying part of that story herself, which raises an intriguing question. If Diana still holds such a meaningful place in the hearts of William's children, could her legacy become even more powerful through a generation that never knew her personally? And could they also carry the same grief William and Harry have carried into the next generation? Let's find out why Diana still matters. By the end, the story comes back to Charlotte, not as a future queen, not as one of the most watched young members of the royal family, and not as someone trying to make a statement about the monarchy. Simply as a granddaughter, remembering a grandmother she never had the chance to meet. That is what makes Charlotte's connection to Diana so touching. She did not need to stand in front of cameras and deliver a powerful speech. She did not need to criticize anyone, reopen old royal arguments, or make a dramatic accusation. Instead, a few simple words from an 11-year-old revealed something far more personal. William still misses his mother. That may sound obvious to anyone who remembers what happened to Diana, but hearing it through Charlotte made the loss feel different. The world remembers William as the teenager who walked behind Diana's coffin in 1997. Charlotte knows him differently. She knows him as her father. She has grown up beside him, listened to him, watched him become a parent, and learned about the woman who came before her through his memories. When Charlotte called Diana Granny Diana and wrote, "Papa is missing you," her innocent words revealed something deeply emotional. Without realizing it, she showed how William's pain and memories of losing his mother had quietly found their way into the next generation. Diana's life ended in 1997. William carried her memory forward. Then, through William, that memory reached Charlotte. And suddenly, the little girl who had never met Diana became an unexpected link between the woman Diana was and the royal family she would never live to see. That is what makes Charlotte's connection to her grandmother so intriguing. The real question is not whether Charlotte knew Diana. She never could. She never heard her grandmother's voice, held her hand, or created a single personal memory with her. The deeper question is something else. How much of Diana has Charlotte already come to know through the people, stories, photographs, and memories surrounding her? Because sometimes, family memories do not need to come from direct experience. They can be inherited. They can be passed down through stories told at home, photographs hanging on walls, names chosen for children, and quiet moments when someone says, "Your grandmother would have loved this." And if Charlotte continues carrying those memories as she grows older, Diana's influence may reach far beyond the generation that actually knew her. Diana may be gone, but through Charlotte, her story is still moving forward. What do you think about Charlotte's words? Could William's children carry the grief of losing Diana into the next generation? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.